So really quickly before I get into my impressions of the Street Fighter 6 beta, I was out of town the weekend that this beta took place, and I was kind of sent a code spontaneously on Wednesday night. And Capcom was just like, "Oh yeah, participate in the beta this weekend," and I was like, "What?" So I had plans that unfortunately I couldn't change, so I didn't get much time with the beta itself, only a couple hours. So I just wanted to put that out there that if you're looking for, impressions, dissecting the various elements of the beta and, just a generalized idea of what was included in here, you're probably not going to find that here. In addition to that, and I'm pretty open with this, but I think it deserves to be mentioned, I'm terrible at fighting games. I am a button masher. I don't take time to learn the combos. I'm not in it for the competitive offerings. I typically play fighting games only for the career/campaign mode and for a more generalized fun offline arcade mode. I don't really dabble in any of the online multiplayer components, and I also don't really take the time to learn combos and play this game the way that it's intended. So if you're looking for, again, impressions that are basically around different elements of the characters and how they perform with the different tactics, I'm not going to be able to give you that as well. This is going to be a more casualized look into my brief time with the Street Fighter 6 beta. So for those of you who are interested in that, you can continue watching. And for those of you who are looking for something else, I hope I saved you some time. You can exit the video now. So I was really intrigued with the new direction that Capcom was taking Street Fighter 6 in. I mean, when we first saw that initial gameplay, the idea of character customization and then you being able to explore the stages in a more three-dimensional space, talking with NPCs and then actually engaging in fights, doing side missions, this seemed really intriguing, and it seemed to me at least that Capcom was going for a much more substantial core change to this franchise that was going to hopefully innovate the fighting genre in the future. This beta is specifically designed around the multiplayer components, so I didn't have any time with the arcade mode or the campaign mode or anything like that. But I still got to create my own custom character. I got to walk around in this sort of hub world, which is like the lobby system for multiplayer games. And, I still got to get a general idea of some of the fighters on display. For one, I have to say that the hub world is a pretty interesting take, and I actually kind of like it because it gives you something to do in between matches, and it adds a layer to, this game that was previously just non-existent before. In between matches, you can walk around, you can talk with other players in a more casualized environment, and the way in which you begin matches is also quite entertaining. You find arcade cabinets either with one person, or you can actually spectate other matches that people are playing in, and you would just sit down and engage in a match that way. So you find an empty seat, sit down, you can either wait for someone to join you or find someone who's currently playing by themselves and challenge them to a game that way. Again, it just added that layer that was sort of non-existent with the previous fighting games and stuff like that. You actually have things to do in between. And this area in between matches actually serves some purpose because you're earning currency as you participate in these fights, and you can spend currency on sort of this gift shop that's in this hub, and you can buy cosmetic items for your character, your custom character you can wear around. So, you can really give them a unique personality. You have ranking systems. You can, buddy up with people, engage in tournaments. You can even play classic fighting games. Like they had some classic games in here, not just like the Street Fighter classic games, but other side-scrolling 2D games as well that you can play from Capcom's history and roster. So I actually kind of like this element of this hub world, this sort of play space that's kind of going on in between your matches. At the same time, though, I can understand some people's main issues with this in that it's going to take longer for you to actually get in matches and engage with the core game. Because you're spending time sort of walking around and trying to find an open, lobby and an open space, you're spending less time outside of the core game of Street Fighter rather than actually playing it. So for that purpose, I can see why some people aren't exactly on board with these changes. But I think, it adds a cool layer there to the game that was non-existent, and it's something fun to do, and I think it does give this game a more unique identity, versus the other games in the franchise. As I mentioned before, you also have character customization, and the customization is really, really vast. You can essentially create any character you want, and I would say it's just as detailed, just as deep as any RPG out there. So if you're someone who likes to mess with sliders and just really create a unique character, you shouldn't have any issue here in Street Fighter 6. It looks to be extremely deep. There's options and tons of options for everything. You know, you can create pretty unique looking characters. In fact, you can create some pretty freaky abominations as well. There were a couple people throughout the beta that I saw that just, man, these people did not look right. It's downright terrifying at times. So you can do just about anything you want with the character customization tool, which I think is cool. You know, it doesn't appear in the actual multiplayer component of the game. You know, you simply have your main Street Fighter roster characters, but in between those matches, you'll be able to see that custom character, and that's who you'll be interacting as with other players in the lobby system. And from what I understand, this custom character will carry over to the actual campaign/career mode as well. So, you know, the game's going to have that element going for it as well. You'll be able to explore and actually utilize that character in a much more personal way than just sort of engaging with other people. I think the overall general feel of the game is pretty solid all around. I didn't run into any issues with frame rates or anything like that. I will say that the graphics are a hit and miss for me. I think this game has some nice detail. It's obviously going for that more stylized artistic direction that sort of Street Fighter 4 started and was elevated with Street Fighter 5, but in this game I feel everything comes together a little bit more. However, there are some things I noticed where the detail level just didn't quite seem to be there. Like, it seemed like they were trying to go for a mix of cartoonish characters with realistic texturing, and sometimes it doesn't always come across. What's interesting about Street Fighter 6 here is that this game is actually created with the Resident Evil engine, which has been the proprietary engine that Capcom's been using for all their games. We've seen some incredible results. I think the Resident Evil engine is fantastic. The games always look great, and they always perform great as well. However, I just don't know if the graphical art direction is really speaking to me in Street Fighter 6 so far, at least when I played at the beta. Some of the characters look a bit weird. And I don't think they're intended to look the way, you know, that they are when they come across like that. But I just expected to have more fine detail on a lot of different elements, especially when it comes to like skin rendering. It's some pretty flat subsurface scattering, or even if they're using that at all, sometimes it doesn't come across so accurately as you would really expect some of the characters to look. That being said, the environments look fantastic. I think the detail present in all of the stages looks really good. You have, you know, particles and stuff that kind of fly up and interact with your characters as you're actually flying. I love how the weather actually affects the cloth on your characters. So if you're fighting in a really windy environment, you'll see your character's clothes kind of blowing with the wind and whatnot. I like the direction that they're going for, but I have to say that I didn't really get a next generation or current generation feel when I was playing this game. You know, it didn't kind of wow me in that aspect, but it was pretty clean. You know, they were definitely going for a more stylized look. I do like the whole aesthetic of the street paint and stuff being kicked up in a more dynamic way when certain moves are being played out. I think that in of itself is pretty well done. And I found that it didn't really get into the way of the art direction at all. It just added those small little details and elements. And I think it comes across really well here. I just expected a little bit more detail. This is a beta, and the game's not coming out until next year, so Capcom has plenty of time to go in here and really polish up everything. I think the roster of characters is also pretty great so far. You have some new characters, which all kind of have a unique feel to them. And of course, you have the more iconic characters that return in this entry as well. I was happy to see Juri in this game, who's been sort of my main character ever since Street Fighter 4. So I don't think that there'll be any issues with anyone finding a particular character. They all felt pretty different from one another. But again, I can't really speak to their level of combo and complexity and their ease of use. Now, let's get on to some criticisms. For one, we have a more complex game lobby system now where you can kind of explore and talk to more people. But I was a bit surprised when I first started playing the game, I didn't see any character customization, options. Because what you typically expect to happen is when you're playing these fighting games, you select your character, then you get into the match. But every single time I sat down to play against someone, it just put me into a match right away, and I wasn't able to choose my character. Everything is handled in a subset of menus now, so you no longer get a character selector screen at the beginning of each match. What happens is you have to go into a menu and select the character that you want to play as. And then from there forward, every match that you enter, it will just automatically select that character. I'm not a fan of this, and I hope that it's just for the beta and that they'll find a way to bring back the more classic style of selecting your character, because it just adds additional steps to an otherwise simplistic process. Even if you were still playing as the same character, having an additional screen come up just being like, oh, choose your character, it takes seconds anyway. So, and people might want to experiment with different matches and whatnot to have to go into a menu and then go through a subset of menus. And it was actually kind of hard to find. I had to go in there and kind of find out, okay, I have to click on this button, which opens up this menu, then tab over to the character screen. And, it was kind of difficult to find where that was located. And I just felt it was sort of unnecessary dress up to make this game appear a little bit more complex. Like they kind of over designed it in that element. I didn't care for that. And the same goes, by the way, for the stages. By default, you have a random stage selector screen, but if you want to play in a particular stage, you have to go into the menu of this where your characters are and select your main stage that you want to play on. And then from there forward, any match that you play will be played in that stage. Again, I just didn't care for this. There's a lot of things that seem to be hidden in the menus of the game and whatnot. And I just felt that it added seconds, if not minutes, to an otherwise more simplistic process of being able to choose this stuff and then loading into the actual match. But what this game does is it just loads you in immediately. So you have to kind of preset everything before you start jumping into a game. One other thing as well, I think this beta was really specifically designed around testing the netcode of certain online matches. I didn't run into too many connectivity issues, but some things did feel a little bit laggy. Obviously, again, this is a beta, it's not final, but I do want to mention as part of feedback that I did feel that things could be a little bit more responsive when it comes to the moveset of the game, different input responses and whatnot. I mean, the controls themselves have been a little bit more simplified. You have now a block button that you can time correctly depending on each hit. So it's not as simple as you holding back on the D-pad or back on your analog stick or your fight stick or whatever. I found that the character didn't block that way. At least I wasn't able to get him to do that. So there's an actual block button right now that's on the controller, and I had to sort of retrain my mindset to be built around using that block button instead of just holding back on the controller. So, different things regarding the controls aside, there is a different feel to this game overall. I did I will say, that certain characters do have a moveset list that you can actually choose between. So, and as I mentioned before, I was playing as Juri, and I remember her moveset quite well from the Street Fighter 4 days. And so there's an actual option in Street Fighter 6 that allows you to have classic controls from Street Fighter 4 that were injected into this game. So if you're more familiar with a specific type of character's moveset and the way that they handled in previous games, you can basically set the control so that the fight style and the moveset is matched between those older games, which I think is really cool. So I didn't really have much negative to say on Street Fighter 6, although I got a limited slice with the game. Admittedly, I wish I did get a lot more time here, but honestly, this got me pretty excited for the upcoming release next year of the full game, because the idea that you can kind of walk around in these spaces and do, various different things, this means that it's going to be a much deeper game overall. And so I'm actually very curious to see how this turns out, and I do wish them luck. I think that what they have here is a pretty cool formula. It's definitely stylized. I love the street aesthetic of everything. And based off what I played so far, this is so much better than what we got with Street Fighter V. All the content seems to be present so far, and there seems to be a lot of different layers for customization. And again, them sort of reinvigorating this franchise by trying to do something new with it, something innovative. So I welcome that. I think that's pretty awesome, and I'll look forward to the game's release when it comes out. So that's it. Apologies for my mediocre impressions on the game. I didn't really get to, play much of it, sadly, but I did enjoy what I played overall. I loved all the stylistic changes. I think the graphics are good, but I would like to see some more detail with the characters and how they look. And I just think they need to fix the organization element. All the administrative stuff surrounding the game seems to be what's really suffering the most. The fact that I have to go through menus to select a character and a stage and customization options, and they're hidden behind a subset of menus. It's not even in your face. You have to kind of search for it and find it. I didn't really care for that, but that's what you have a beta for very early in development. And like I said, Capcom has months to basically go ahead and fix this. And I hope that they do. I hope that we get a really solid Street Fighter game that really, gives us the feeling of the classic games, but puts it into a new direction and, gives it a new breath of life going forward. So I'm looking forward to seeing where this game takes off, and hope you guys enjoyed my impressions. And until then, I guess I'll just be waiting for the game to come out. Have a good one, guys.